everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and joining me today are Lori.
Hello.
T.
Hey.
And our special guest, Lexi.
Hi.
This is episode 22, which we're calling The Masks of Family Ties. We are going to be talking a little bit about Lexi's recent experience that she's had in her family and kind of discovering some things about her background that she didn't know. And we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit with her, as well as just discuss the general mental health of that. But just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or medical professionals. And as I stated, so this is Tina's daughter, Lexi, and I think Tina will introduce her best. So Tina, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you. So just a little background. Lexi is my daughter. She is my youngest daughter. Before I became pregnant with her, her dad and I had split up for a short time. During that time, was in another relationship. And then her dad and I decided to get back together, discovered I was pregnant, and we didn't know who the dad was going to be. So back then, it was really difficult to get paternity tests. So we had all decided that the best course, because she has two older sisters, that the best course was for my husband he was just going to be her dad. It didn't matter. That's what he said. It did not matter. This was his kid. And so we decided to raise all the girls as a family. We may have made a slightly different choice had we had different options for finding out paternity for Lexi's sake. It turned out to be Lexi. But we didn't have that available to us. And so we just moved forward. Well, some time ago, Lexi found out that her dad was not her biological dad. So she decided to go on a journey from there. And that's the part I'll let Lexi talk about.
All right. I found out the possibility of having a different bio dad than my sisters around the age of 21, because I had a conversation with, I still call him my dad. He's the one that raised me, so it doesn't matter to me. I had a conversation with him, and it came about that there's a 50-50 chance he's not my bio dad. And so I didn't really do anything about it for a while. I didn't really know how I felt on it. I know I didn't feel negatively. I kind of had feelings of being a little different than my sisters, but no less of family or anything like that.
Right.
And so when he said that made sense, and I had like a strong feeling like I could see that being more possible than 50-50 at this point. And so a few years ago, my dad and his sister decided to take an Ancestry.com test, and they found out that they have a different bio dad from each other. And my aunt got to meet those family members, and I remember getting more curious at that point, of just wanting to know for sure, even though I had a strong feeling. And then I didn't really think about finding other family members if it turned out to be that way, because it just didn't cross my mind until I finally, I think it was last month, I got the results of it. But I had taken the test because it shows you your matches. And I knew that if I didn't match with my dad, because he had already taken the test, then I knew that I had all these other family members to look for. And so I got the results back, and I found a second cousin who happened to be my bio dad's cousin, and they had not talked in 40 years, about a long time. They didn't have a strong, they probably lived farther apart. So she didn't know where to find him. But when I was waiting for her to respond to me on Facebook, because I found her Facebook, it was the only one in that area that had her name. And she confirmed that she had taken an ancestry test. And so I had a strong feeling it was her. I didn't know for sure yet. And then, so I was starting to follow that trail, and I went on her Facebook and found some people with the same last name that my bio dad's supposed to have. And then I found a woman that had that last name, and she was married to a man that had the same first name and last name. But it started getting a little crazy because it turned out that he just had the same name as the man and happened to be his wife be mutual friends with my second cousin, but he wasn't the same man that I was looking for. But he and his wife actually found his Facebook because they had talked like 20, 30 years prior. Because of having the same name, there was a mix up there and they happened to get connected. But I just thought it was a small world that his wife happened to be friends with my second cousin. And so I found his Facebook, and they also sent me his sister's Facebook, and I messaged them both. And he responded, and we both corroborated the background. Like I let him lead with him knowing my mom, and happened to know my aunt, my dad's sister, because they had met at her house. And so him telling me like his side of the story confirmed that that's the same person that I was looking for, and that happened. I got the results, and then the next day I found him. So it happened in a day, and suddenly I had a dad, and he's been married to his wife for 16 years, 15, I think. So I have another stepmom, and I have 2 siblings that live with him that he has regular contact with, and then 3 others that similar stories to the women wanting to raise the children away with their other people. And he has contact with the 3rd daughter, but she doesn't know that it's super complicated. I'm not going to get into that. That's their stuff. But I can meet the 2 youngest siblings. I'm actually planning to take a trip here in the next month to go meet them. They live on the other side of the country from us, so it'll be my first time flying and just meeting them. So it's been pretty crazy for me.
Lexi, what what an incredible journey you've been on. This kudos to you for not panicking in it. It shows such maturity, and it shows good mental and emotional health on your part. Because I know so much more about your story because I've known you since, you were like this big, and you grew up with my sons, and I consider you and your sisters like my adoptive daughters that I don't have, so I absolutely adore you all, and, have seen you grow up, and the way that you handled this was, as I said, very mature, but just amazing. It could have gone very differently. I don't know if you remember, but I'm adopted. And everything that I've heard about my adoptive family in no way makes me want to run out and find them.
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, your journey and your story is inspiring me to think, well, maybe it wouldn't all be bad, and maybe they're different people. And, so what I'm hearing from you kind of gives me hope that maybe I could go out and look for some of these. I do know that my adoptive mother had heard from the social worker that we do have we had a baby brother out there. My sister and I were adopted together. And so there is, and I believe my sister went out and looked up, did all this stuff. But at the time, I asked her, I said, please don't include me in any of that. I don't want anything to do with what you're doing. I don't want to know. I don't want to meet them. I don't want some stranger on my doorstep telling me there's some long lost whatever, I just was not emotionally ready. And, but with all the counseling that I've had and all the things that I'm doing, and then listening to your story, I feel like, maybe there is some positives and some really good things that can happen out of this. So thank you for sharing your story with me and everyone else, giving me hope.
Thank you. I think the best thing about it is no matter which way it goes, it's closure. It's just a final answer. And I know internally I was panicking like inside, but on the outside I couldn't do anything about it, if that makes sense. I just went with the flow. Sometimes it's just easier to do that.
Faith and courage, a lot of people, how we have faith and courage is that even when we're scared, even when we're fearful, even when we are still moving forward, we're still taking that step, and that's what you did. Even though it's not that we aren't scared or that we don't feel these things or we don't have a ton of emotions associated with them, but we still move forward in that healthy way. And we still say, okay, I can handle the next thing and I'm going to keep going. And that's what you did. And that's what was so mature and very healthy about the way that you handled it. So
thank you. I think you're never brave without the fear. The fear has to be there to even be called brave. So
true. Well, I want to thank you for sharing, because I think it's a lot of people would really be going through this and like, I don't know if I want to share that. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. I know you and I don't know each other that well, and I was just wondering, I know Lori and Tina, you guys have, Tina's your mom, and Lori you've known for so long.
Fair mom.
Yeah, like a second mom. Do you feel like if this had happened maybe 5-10 years ago that you would have reacted the same way, or do you feel like it would have been a different reaction at that time?
No, I feel like relatively I probably would have reacted the same. Just I've always been curious about why I felt different, and even not maybe to necessarily meet the other family members, but just to kind of self-reflect of where I get some of my traits from, and just questions answered at a younger stage. But now that I'm older, I feel like now I'm like, I've missed as much time, and my siblings that I'm going to be meeting, they're 9 and 13 right now, so I could have met them when they were that young, but I guess I'm just more mature now, so that's the main difference of not doing it as soon.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to note. Like, how old are you, if you don't mind sharing?
I am 26. I'll be 27 in like 2 months.
Yeah. So you're in your 20s. So, and I can understand, like, you might not have been as receptive to maybe the meeting back then. So, and then you kind of alluded to it there with your answer, was that growing up, did you ever have any feelings like, why am I not like my sisters? Why do I not act like dad? Or why is different? Did you have those like kind of thoughts, but then you just kind of pushed them in the back of your head?
Yeah, I actually remember I've always been said that I'm my mom's twin, like I look just like her, but I've always still had this feeling like I'm like adopted or something. But I knew that wasn't possible because I do look just like my mom.
You do, yeah. I can just look at back and forth. I'm like, you guys look so much alike.
Yeah. And so like I always just had like a feeling. I just never thought of it being like the possibility of it, because I didn't hear a lot of stories of people finding their bio family except for like on movies. So like I didn't really think of it being like, oh, this could happen to me.
Right.
But I definitely felt like a difference. I just thought I got more of my mom than my sisters did, or I just didn't get anything from my dad, and it turns out that I didn't. But
well, not that dad anyway.
Right. No, like ever since talking to him, I see a lot of similarities between me and him and my other siblings. So just like everything just made sense. It was just all happening at once.
I have another question for you. How is this affecting your relationship with your father, your dad, who you call your dad?
I think he was just worried that I would take it all negatively. I don't think he worried about me not looking at him the same. And I made that clear with him that it doesn't change anything. Like, I still call him dad. I call the other man by his name right now. I just, until I meet him.
Right.
But he's the one that raised me, and I don't think he feels any differently. He tried to make that clear that I'm always going to be his kid.
Amen.
But he always knew of the possibility.
Right.
So I think he was prepared for that, and we've been good
Good.
with that. It hasn't really changed anything.
And without, say what you want to say, but how is it affecting you and your mom?
I think that it's for the same thing. I think she was worried that I wasn't gonna, it was gonna affect me negatively, but I hope that she knows that I'm doing good, and we haven't changed anything. We've been excited talking about my plans to go see them, and
Right.
I can say younger sister now. I was the youngest before I knew this, but my youngest sister made a birthday card for my son. He just turned 1, so she made him a birthday card, and it's really cool. And so we've been talking about that because me and my mom are both artsy too, and it's cool to know that I get that from that side of the family too.
So then, speaking of that, then T, how are you feeling about all of this new news? Because this, you knew there was a potential that she wasn't, at the time, the man who raised her child, but he raised her as his own, and now she's found her biological family. And how are you reacting to all this?
So, first of all, we didn't know while she was growing up, for sure. So while she was growing up, I was just so grateful she looked so much like me, because then, we could just pass off her differences and live life like it was just because she's just my mini me. But there was a lot of complications when her dad and I split up. And so there's been, in the beginning, there was strain on Lexi's and I's relationship because of the age she was when we split up. And she was going through some things at that time. Okay. So, and I was less available. So, but as time has gone on, we've rebuilt our relationship. And then now she's got kids of her own. And I think with each of my kids, as they've had kids, our relationship has strengthened because we get to bond as mothers. I'm still their mom, but we get to bond as mothers. And I also think, as Lexi was talking, I was thinking about the fact of the timing of her finding out. So before I start on that part, just one of my reactions is a little bit of embarrassment, because it shines a light on a time in my life that I may not have behaved the way I should have, but it looks worse than it was too. So there's that combination. And so it's like, I feel like when we tell the Lexi story, I feel like, well, hang on, let me explain things first, so you don't think
yeah,
but that's actually worked out better than I thought it would, and it's not been as bad as I thought it would be. But I think what helps with Lexi is she's had her own experiences as a young adult that she went through around the same age I was then. So I didn't worry as much about her reaction to me, because I knew she would understand, because she had her own experiences and has had things that some tough stuff she's had to deal with. So that has given her some wisdom and whatnot, which is, I'm just so proud of her. And that would be, I think, the biggest feeling I have is how proud I am of her, because she has handled this so maturely and with such grace, huge amount of grace. At no time has she even indicated in any way that it's changed how she sees myself or her dad. So I also think that part of what helps is that her bio dad and I did there was no bad blood. We didn't make I didn't make the decision to not include him in her life because he had done something wrong. He didn't do anything wrong at all. He was a good guy. So I think that helped her going in, as being able to tell her, look, he's not going to reject you. I really doubt he'll reject you because he was a good guy and he wanted you. And
Right.
so
Yeah,
I
it wasn't
think,
like you had like an abusive relationship with him and that's why you were no longer
right,
together.
exactly. And him walking away was out of respect to me and respect to this unborn child to have a chance at a family, you know,
Mhm.
and not have it fractured. And like I said, we were all really young and we didn't have access to paternity tests. And so it's not like we could get an answer.
Yeah.
Even after she was born, it would be really hard. I mean,
Complicated.
there were paternity tests, but they were expensive and it just would have been really hard. So the decision was ultimately left to me by both her dad and her bio dad. And so that's the way that went, but it wasn't because he had done anything wrong. So I think that helped for her.
Awesome.
Yes.
And I think that's a good thing to maybe talk about some more, because that's where my fears came from, you know, and I didn't have, it wasn't a healthy situation, you know. So for me, right off the bat, there was much more likelihood that I would be finding or coming into a situation that really might not be very healthy.
Right.
But that's not to say that it might not be great
Right.
or fine. It's just that because of the circumstances before my being adopted, and even through the process of adoption, you know, because there was a lot of abandonment and drugs and alcohol and abuse, and you know, that my situation definitely didn't, at least on the surface, lend itself to this is going to be a positive outcome, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know, even with maturity, I still have, you know, some reservations because, you know, but I think you're right, Tina, in that the older I get and the more mature and the more stable and settled I am, the more I know I can make choices and I can put up boundaries and I can do things safely and I can, you know, I also know, just by the very nature of people, that we change, that we all grow. Most of us, there are a few who remain eternal Peter Pans and, you know, little Tinkerbells, but most of us grow and mature. And, you know, the other thing I want to touch on too, that you said, and this is where my kudos go out to you, Tina. It's really hard to have our sins, our past, you know, brought out like that, and a spotlight, if you will, on that. And I love your vulnerability and your transparency and your willingness to talk about it, because you were young. We are all human beings. We're all infallible.
I think I was 22.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. You were still a baby.
Yeah.
You know, as we've said before, your frontal lobe wasn't even done yet.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You know, and when it's funny because as moms, right, we can look at our children and we can have grace and forgiveness and unconditional love. And then we look at ourselves at the same age and we can be much harder on ourselves. We can be so hard on our actions and reactions and everything that we do, right? And we don't tend to give ourselves that grace, which is what I think can lend itself to some negative things coming up, and tension and just a lack of grace and empathy all around. And the only way that something like this happens is when everybody is ready, mature, full of grace, willing to be transparent and vulnerable, and like, yep, I was a human and this is what I did and this is how it happened, and not, it's not about feeling bad about it or anything. It's just about accepting it.
Yeah.
Also, if there is a piece of that, taking responsibility for whatever it is, and then lovingly moving forward.
Right.
And so what I love about this story that the two of you have brought to us, this is that that's what this is. And that's why, I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like that this is a really great example
Mhm.
of how with grace and love, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, Lexi, your story gives me hope, because mine may not come out as easy and clean as the one that you had, but I am so excited for you.
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited for, there's just, this is wonderful. You have more family.
Right.
And it's like and I love what you said too about like your new sister making a card.
Mhm.
That love is just so heartwarming and touching, and what an opportunity for
Yeah.
your children and all of your family
Right.
to just celebrate
Yeah.
and be okay with this, what could be a really awkward situation. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this is an amazing story. And I want to say kudos to the dads out there who, take on the responsibility of a child that may not be theirs and raise them as their own and don't see them any differently. Because I think that's often the stigma, is that, men are the one, they can easily walk away, and it's just, but then there's the men who do stand up. So I think props to those guys who do stand up like that and be like, no, I'm going to raise this kid as my own. And I'm glad that your relationship with him has not changed.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't have the that in my, family history. Like, I know who my parents are. It's obvious who my parents are, but I have a lot of family. Like, my dad is one of 7 kids, and of them, I think 6 of the 7 had children. So I have cousins all over the States, and there's cousins I've never met. And I
Yeah.
know one of our cousins is starting to work on trying to get like the DNA tests done and stuff, because there's a lot of family questions we have as to like where more of our heritage is, and just stuff that we might not know about in our family. And unfortunately, my dad passed away last year before he was able to do the test. So I will be doing one soon. I'm hoping to just kind of see, and I'm curious too, just like who's in our family, because my grandmother was really into genealogy.
Mhm.
And I think this is going to be a great step too for your children, because now, you get to show like, wow, like I have multiple families now, and
Yeah.
there's a bigger family than maybe what they had. Cause I'm an only child, so I don't have siblings. So for me, it's like, oh, okay, I'm mom and dad, and, and then I don't have any children right now. So, one day I hope I have kids, but you never know. But yeah, I think this is a great stepping stone for you guys. And I look forward to kind of an update, when you do get to
Yeah.
meet your family and just see how it goes. And, you may get there and like, man, this is cool, but I'm going to keep them from a distance. But it may be like, yeah, I'm going to visit them on a, regular basis. So
Right.
you have opened up so many possibilities, and just being, like you said, mature and more aware of who you are. And now you're a mom. So your brain is it's thinking differently than just, like, oh, I'm young, young and 20 and I can do whatever.
Right.
And yeah, I think, moving forward is great. And I also think that there's this can affect other people around you too. Like, we talked a lot about the family, and yes, it's the family ties, but like, how are your sisters taking this? Like, have they because I mean, I would imagine they wouldn't be taking it like super bad, because like you're still their sister.
Everyone's pretty much taking it the same, of like, it doesn't really change anything. It just kind of answers some questions. But my oldest sister was like, well, now, like, if I lose a kidney or something, I don't
Oh,
might not have a sister go to for that.
right. Yeah.
Which same thing for me. Like,
Which
she's the one that thinks
actually,
of like,
That's hilarious.
yeah, which is actually that the health piece was actually something I was going to ask about, because
that
I
was my
feel
main
like
thing.
oftentimes parents and you have similar health risks and or those diseases already. And so has a discussion been had, or are you going to have a discussion with him, is like, hey, are there medical things I may need to know about? Because that's often, like, if there's a genetic something that's passed down through your genes, is that anything?
Yeah, actually, we've been talking about that a little bit, because originally, before I knew the results, my dad the one that raised me has Hashimoto's,
Okay.
and I have can't say it right, hypothyroidism.
Thyroidism.
And so, like, I was like, well, if we are related, that would make sense. But then, talking to my bio dad, he has hypothyroidism too, and has other stuff going on. I can't remember what it's called, but it affects his legs and his hands, where he can't pick up like a penny or a card, or
Neuropathy.
yeah, I think that's it. So he has that, so I have to watch for that. I don't know if it's genetic or if it's caused by something else. I haven't looked it up yet, but we were just talking about that recently. But that was one of my main things, is like, I need to know this history too. Even if I don't go and meet them, I need to know, like,
Right.
I have, or if I'm not related to my dad that raised me, then I know that I won't have as many risks of the stuff that his family has.
Right.
So one of the things that she did discover that is in his family that is really important for her to know is that his mom died of cancer at a pretty young age. So it's going to be important for her to find out what kind it was, and to help her screen for it.
Yes.
If there's any, because sometimes, like, there's cancers that moms pass to daughters,
Right.
and that go down to the female line.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be just your dad's side of the family. It's not a gender thing. It's just his side of the family is prone to this cancer. So it's going to be important for her to get more information on that too, not only for herself, but her kids. So
Yeah.
I have 2 underlying causes for my liver disease, and one is a genetic.
Right.
But I wouldn't have known because we have no medical records, which is part of actually why I believe my sister decided, she wanted to know these things, she, and so I just asked her, please don't involve me. I'm not ready for that. I don't want to know anything. And like I said, maybe I'll change my mind. We'll see where we go. But yeah, medical is a huge reason why a lot of what I've heard on TV and in articles and things like that, there's so many things that it is helpful. I've always just, when it says, next, do your parents have this? I just cross through all that because I have no clue. I'm like, I don't know. No medical records, no nothing, I've just grown so accustomed to crossing it out and saying, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I joke with my, medical staff and whatever. I'm like, no, I was adopted in the Stone Age. I didn't do all that stuff. There was no such thing as an open adoption back then. It was, I didn't know about it. In the 70s. So, usually adoption was still something you weren't really doing a lot of talking about. It was one of those oddly, I don't know, we'll have to go into like taboo masks or something,
Yeah.
things that, just weren't socially acceptable, back then. So it just wasn't something you talked about a lot.
So one of the things I want to say to what you're saying, Lori, is that here's some things to consider. First of all, through my experiences with work and whatnot, I work with a lot of dysfunctional families. And one of the things that I can say is that, yes, there is often an intergenerational component. So if one generation is abusive, just straight up abusive, likely they learned it from somewhere. So they learned it from their parents, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a component to your family that might change that. And that's that there was addiction involved. Well, that can be intergenerational. It is not always. So they may be the piece of the family that was doing that, but you'll find a lot of extended family members were not. So their parents may not have been, or one of their sets of parents may not have been like that, especially back in that day. And then another piece to that too is that their siblings may not have gone down that road, or their siblings' children, or their other children, they may have gotten help. So there's a lot of things that you don't know per se, but it is still reason for caution and certainly understandable. What's great about how things are done today, watching Lexi do it, is that she got her ancestry back, which was really cool to see some of the culture, heritage, whatever you want to call that stuff on
I have
there.
Native American.
Yeah.
Through him. She has Native American through him. And she's normally blonde, just so you know. So right now you can kind of sort of see, oh, okay, I can see where that's at. But no, normally she's blonde and it doesn't show up at all. But anyway. Wow, where was I going with that? I think, watching you go through the process. I was talking about that. Yeah. That then you get the results back of who else has taken a test and see who you're linked to. You don't have to contact them. As a matter of fact, I think you can set it up so they can't see that you linked to them. So you don't I think you can do that. Most things you can.
Yeah, you can set it to show them the match. I think I remember the setting.
Yeah. So others others may not see you match to them. So keeping that in mind, there might be people out there who have it set up that way too. But anyway, but you can go look and see, like if you see, this person's listed as a first cousin, well, then you can find them on Facebook. You can find them that way. That's what Lexi did. And so get a feel for who these people are and decide whether you want to make that contact or not. So just because you take the step doesn't mean you're all in. You can go in the shallow end.
Right. No, and that's a really good point. And I think kudos to social media, because I think a lot of people, there's just such a stigma to social media is like the vein of all existence. And it's just it's not great. But in this aspect, this is a great piece because, you get these results, you find out somebody you're connected to, and it's like, what do you do now? And 30 years ago, it was send a letter to the first person you found in the phone book. And if you're lucky, you'll get a response. In my family, I know, so my mom's parents married while they were still in the Army during World War II. And my grandfather, so my mom's dad, there was always kind of the joke that he married my grandmother at the time he did, because he didn't want to go back home to his home state to where all his family was and possibly marry the person he was supposed to marry or planning to marry when he went into the Army. So there was always the joke that, maybe they have half siblings in, somewhere else in those states or in the world, and they didn't know about. And I, with my mom's passed away now, and I mean, my uncle's still alive, her brother, but, we may never know that. And back then, 50 years ago, we would have never been able to just go on social media and look up somebody with the same last name. And a friend of ours here, or a friend of mine here, she actually has the same her maiden last name is the same as my grandparents' last name. So she's like, yeah, I'm going to look this person's name up just to see. She's been helping me clean out my storage room and going through some of my old family stuff. But it's just amazing the connections and the ties that we find. And I know I had mentioned earlier, my grandmother was really into genealogy, and she tracked people back. I mean, she used to do that. She would send the letters and say, hey, I think I might be related to you, or, hey, and then she'd maybe get a letter, or she'd get some family pictures and stuff. So it's really neat how now ancestry.com can do so much of that. And like Tina said, it's like stepping in the shallow end, because you don't have to physically go see them. You can just message them on Facebook or look on Facebook and see, well, I don't really like the looks of them, or I don't like what they're doing, so I don't know if I'm going to contact them. Whereas, 20 years ago, you might not have had that chance. So I think in this way, I think social media is a great tool. I love it for communicating with family because most of my family lives out of the state I'm in. In fact, I'm the only one of my family that lives in the state. So I don't see them that frequently. So Facebook's a great tool.
I was going to say, when I first got the results back, I was thinking that if I find anyone and they're older, how likely are they going to have Facebook? And when I did find the bio dad, he was talking about how he never goes on Facebook. And the second cousin that I found, she rarely goes on Facebook because they're in their 40s, a little older, and it's just less likely in the older generation, I think. So I was like, oh, what if my trail goes dead? But it's still way more, results are easier to find, definitely with the internet. And there were I almost lost my trail a couple times along the way. I was like, oh my gosh.
But you persisted, which is awesome. A lot of people would have just given up, but you didn't, and that's awesome too.
So I definitely want to give a shout out to her bio dad's wife, because that's an area that could have gone sideways.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, who of us would want to get that message like, my spouse has another kid?
She was excited. She said it was a very major day for him, and it was amazing. And actually, my dad that raised me and my aunt, when they found out, she pursued reaching out to family as well. She got a hold of a couple sisters, but the bio dad didn't want to meet her because it was at the event of the dad cheating on his current wife, and I believe that they're still together, and so he didn't want to stir all that up. And so I was almost expecting something like that happening, but she was just the total opposite. And my 13-year-old and 9-year-old siblings also, I was worried, are they gonna be excited or are they gonna not want this? And so everyone is super excited, and I feel very lucky to have that, because I know that it isn't always the case. There is the possibility of the rejection, and it's definitely something to prepare for, but I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, for sure.
Depending on like you said, Lori, the not hearing such good things makes it do I want the answer?
Right.
A little more scary, if you will, I guess. But, I know we always like to we're very faithful women here. And I was thinking, I've always said that the Old Testament is like an ancient Israelite soap opera. Because it's just, that's what it reminds me of. There's this family, and so killed so-and-so, and so did this, and this people were exiled, and these people were, and
this guy wants this guy's wife, so he's going to send that guy off to war.
Right. Oh yeah, but that guy's a man after God's own heart. And you're like, wait a minute. Okay, I guess I'm not so bad.
Most of these people are in Jesus's lineage, just saying.
Right. So it was really interesting. I wanted to look up a couple of scriptures, and one that came to mind is something like this. And I think about this genealogy thing that you guys are talking about. What's it called? The tree thing, the
Ancestry.com.
Ancestry, yeah, those. And I know there's some other ones, out there, but
23andMe.
Yeah, we're not plugging anything. Anyway, this scripture came to mind, and I really thought about 1 Chronicles 9:1. It says, so all Israel was enrolled by genealogies, and behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel. And I'm just like, somewhere, all these names, they're written, right? And they are there. They're there to be discovered. They're there to be revealed. They're there to run away from, to run to, whatever it is you're going to do with them. But they are there. Those connections are there. And if we're patient and grace-filled and mature, then we can move forward in these really exciting new ways and find those really deep connections. But I also want to give some hope for those that don't come from some healthy things.
Right.
You're no less important. And it says it in Hebrews.
Right.
Says Hebrews 7:3 says, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priestly perpetuality, meaning we have genealogy in our faith, in God. And so even if we don't have that here on earth, we have it in heaven. We have it eternally. So don't let that, get you. Let you can find it, but if you don't, guess what? You still have genealogy. You still have a grounding in faith. And just want to share that. I always like to share the positive, and bring scripture because I love scripture. So.
Right. Yeah, and it's important too. Like, I know for me, like as an adult, so last year I became an orphan, like for all intents and purposes. My dad died, my mom had passed away a few years prior. And so I take comfort in knowing that I'm still a child of God and I'm still their child. I don't have my parents on earth, but I always have God. And I think, the piece that we can all kind of, I don't know, take away from this is that, families are always messy. And I think that, having courage and having support in your family to do the things you're doing, like I'm just spitballing here, but Lexi, if you hadn't had as much of a support from your mom, you might not have been as gung-ho about doing it. Or, that's, you have a support system, a strong support system that's, positive, like, hey, we're just going to support you doing this. And I think, Lori, like you said, your sister at the time was starting to look into like your guys' family history is, let's see, but you weren't ready. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to be ready. But when you have, like, you knew you were adopted.
Yes.
For Lexi, it's, as an adult, you find out the man you were raised with as your father is not your biological father. And that can be jarring for people. And I don't know, Tina, if you've ever worked with people who've gone through something similar, like their reactions or like how they've taken it, because I can imagine it can cause some depression and anxiety and, stress in the family because of it.
Just coming out of what you're talking about, I mean, you listed a lot of different factors. There's so many factors to how we're going to handle these things. For me, one of the things you asked me is how I was handling this. And I don't know that I got to one of the most important pieces to me, and that's supporting Lexi. Like, she had no choices in any of this. And so being as graceful as I could to support her was super important. So that made it easy. I myself kind of feel like a partial orphan in a way because I have a good relationship with my own mother, but it's distant. It's sporadic. It's like a lot of time in between talking to her. Not because she's done anything wrong or that she loves me any less. It's just complicated. There's a lot of complications that impact that. So that's just how it is. But when someone says mom, she doesn't pop right into my mind. Unfortunately, I feel really bad for that because that's not her fault. And then my dad, that's super complicated too. He's still alive, but not available currently, we'll just say.
There you go.
So it's like when people say mom and dad, they don't pop into my brain as mom and dad. When people say mom and dad, I think of my kids, and things like that. So
In the same way.
That in a way for me is where I stand, is that I love my extended family. I love my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and my mom and even my dad. I love them. But when I think of family, I think of my kids and grandkids.
Right.
And so that's where my priorities lie, is what am I giving my future generations? And so when Lexi was going through this, we were texting back and forth that day. She was trying to find her dad, her bio dad. And, she would send me pictures of this, and and we talk about characteristics and who he was
Right.
and how he was. And we had a lot of conversations. So I was tracking that. And I kept checking in with her. Are you nervous? Are you scared? Don't be
Hmm.
scared. It's okay, you know. But my goal is to make it easier for her, but not just easier, but a positive experience for her, the best that I could, because I owed that to her, because she was dealing with something that came out of my behaviors, my actions. So that was part of my responsibility. But yeah, and then as far as, you know, the mental health aspect of it, just in general, there's just so many factors to it. And each person, like you guys have all said, has to make a decision based on what they know, what they feel, and what they know about themselves. Like, where are they at? If you're looking for medical answers, but feel confident that you can maintain a boundary around that, that's great. But if you don't feel like you're ready to make a boundary or that you can set those boundaries, I'm wondering who I'm getting feedback off of.
I think it might be Lexi's phone.
I got a phone call and I had to end the call. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I missed some of what you said.
That's okay. Sometimes when that happens, it disrupts your app, and so you start getting feedback.
Yeah, because we're getting the feedback.
So maybe
Lexi, try muting.
I'm muted right now.
My son is also kind of whining in the background. Hold on.
Okay.
I muted it and then I muted it.
Okay. Now there's still a little bit of feedback. You want to keep it muted unless you want to say something?
Maybe I could leave it to you guys.
Are you
rest of
ready
it?
to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing. I think it's a big piece to share that. So thanks for
I was
joining.
excited for it.
Virtual hug from
Oh,
your spiritual mom over there.
yes. Thank you, everybody.
Ah,
for
thank you.
Good to have you.
I'll see you in a little bit.
All right. Enjoy. Bye.
Right.
I just love our mutual family there.
Yeah.
So cute. Okay, T, go ahead. Keep going. You
Okay,
have-
so yeah, if you have good boundaries, if you feel confident in that, and I would also suggest to make sure you have, you know who your support system is through the process if you're going to do that.
Right.
So, for example, Lori, we'll throw you under the bus. You know, if you're ready for it and you feel like, okay, I want to know this, you know that you have a support system and you know who that is, you're used to using them and whatnot. But someone who might not have that would be a good idea to make sure to get that support system in the process. And some people might be out there going, well, that's why I'm looking, is because I don't have a support system. I would like to know my extended family because I don't have one. Right. So, you know, those are all factors. And I think it's just, just keeping that all in mind.
I think it's amazing. Think of one of the things as we were, I was listening to Lexi and listening to you, Tina, and, even Aaron and myself, look at the legacies that we're leaving. Look at the new trails we're blazing. It excites me. It brings me joy. My first book was written on that. What kind of a legacy am I leaving? You mentioned when you hear mom and dad, you think of your children, and I'm exactly the same way. I don't have the best of relationships with my adoptive parents, and I don't know anything about my biological family. So really the whole pursuit in my life, especially once I became a parent, was to be different, to break those cycles, to handle things differently, to be that next generation that says, okay, even if this is our history, even if this is a part of our past, it doesn't have to be a part of my future and my children's future. Right. And then my grandbabies, I love every time I see them. I love they're so loved, and they are the center of their parents' lives. And I love seeing it. I love when they're with me, I know that they have these wonderful foundational, emotional, healthy, spiritual groundings. And that brings me so much joy, because I've always said that I was a cycle breaker, and that, creating new legacies. And this was another great example of how it could have been a not great thing. And it really did. I just know how hard our talking about the sins of our youth, the things that we do, right? The crazy decisions we make before the age of 30. It's hard to be so transparent and vulnerable with that, and to love our children through that while feeling embarrassed, guilty, shameful, all the things that can come up with some of those choices and decisions that we made.
But we can let that have a positive impact on our relationships too.
Yes.
So, like I said, it's a bonding experience for your children to realize you were not a perfect person.
Right.
You know what they're going through when they're making tough decisions.
Yes.
So, and not always coming up with the great ones. I do want to say something real quick, because it occurred to me as you were talking. Not everyone is going to choose to have children.
That's true.
Not everyone gets the opportunity to have children. And so I just kind of want to speak to those people out there as they're listening to us talk about how we're healing through our future generations. And then I got to thinking about family ties. We don't always get to choose the family that we have, but we get to choose who we let into our family as well. Because our family isn't always blood. Sometimes our family is happenstance, friends who our families marry into. Like I have 3 stepchildren, and I love them dearly. That my heart feels just as fond of them as it does of my own children, and I get excited for when they're going to start having kids. And so I started thinking an example of that would be my sister. My sister chose not to have children because she didn't want to continue the generational stuff, and she was really concerned that she wasn't going to be in the best place for her children if she were to have any, that she couldn't give them what they deserved because of what we had gone through as kids. And so she chose not to. And there's a few times she almost thought, okay, I'm ready. I want kids of my own. And but she wasn't married, and she didn't have any significant others at the time. And she really felt like that was an important piece to having kids. And now she's married, very happily married. It's an amazing matchup. It's perfect. Like God knew exactly what he was doing when he matched those two up. But at an age where she's really kind of past that. And so unless God wants it, it's not going to happen. And so it's interesting that God put someone in her life at a time where, so it was, I don't know. Anyway, so does she have regrets at times of not having kids? I think so. I've heard her talk about it. But she puts her energy into how she can pass on, quote unquote, her legacy or impact the future by who she interacts with now. So she might take someone at work under her wing, or she might, my kids or our brothers and sisters' kids. Because I'm the oldest of 9 kids. So there's a lot of us.
Right.
So yeah, there's some kids out there. Anyway, but she's closest with my kids because her and I are full siblings. We have the same parents. So, so yeah, I just want to make a nod out to the people out there that may not have kids for whatever reason. That you can still you can still have those family ties through nieces, nephews, godparent. Being a godparent is a huge deal. Taking people under your wing. There's a lot of people out there like me who don't have a great relationship with our parents. You, Lori, I mean, I know that over time I've developed surrogate parents, parental figures. Not very many, not very often, because I'm pretty picky. I don't want anybody bossing me around.
Well, I know, and I say a lot, that I talk about my tribe.
Mhm.
Talk about those mentors, the people that I prayed about and I sought out for my children to have those good examples. I was very similar to your sister. I seriously, when I found out I was pregnant, and luckily I have shared this with my oldest now, so he knows it's not a shock, but, I I convinced his dad that we were not fit to be parents and we were ready. I was like, no, we should give this child up for adoption before we even start. We are not capable. Look at our families, look at us. Like, I was just sure that I was not supposed to be a parent because I did not feel capable at all. And, mine turned out differently. I do have two sons and, I ended up choosing to be a parent after all. I did take lots of classes. I did read every book I could get my hands on because I knew that my own family history and legacy was not going to help me in that department. Like, it just wasn't. So I did have to go outside and I did have to build the family, the tribe that I surrounded myself and my children with so that we could have this new healthy cycle breaking generation. But it took a lot to do that. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. I have a sibling as well, one of my adoptive siblings who chose, he always said his philosophy was, this is a very dark world and I don't want to bring anybody else into it. That was his thing. And then my biological sister, who I was adopted with, we both had the same uterine cancer. I don't know how miraculously, was able to have my two children, but she was 3 years younger. And so she had to have a full hysterectomy. Gosh, let's see, I was 30, so she would have been like 27 and was not able to have children. And so she adopted.
Mhm.
So, there's lots of ways to have families and I loved what you said, the mentors, the godparents and the, those kind of metaphorical or spiritual parents that really weren't ours, but they're like that in our life. And I know both Tina, you and I both have some of those people in our lives who, I view some of those men as my dads, and I view some of those women as my moms, if you will. And again, not very many of them, but there's a couple that are very special, and I see them as amazing mother role models in my life. And that's who I look to and sought out advice from when I needed it. So yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So
Well, yeah, and I think
great topic.
yeah, and I think like, I know for me, like, we've talked, like, I don't have children, and there's a few sayings I think of, like, what is a legacy? Planting a seeds in a garden you don't get to see, because it's, what are you leaving behind? And it's not always necessarily biological. So, there's that. And then for me, it's like, okay, well, I don't have kids right now, and I'll be 39 this year. So I'm getting to an age where, unless it's God's plan, I probably won't have biological, which sucks. I do want kids. So there's, that piece, but like, I'm getting to know the friends at church, and I've got so many spiritual families. I got you guys. I've built, like, Lori, as you say, your tribe, I've built an amazing tribe. And, I think there were two friends when I graduated high school that I truly kept in touch with, like, right after high school, and that I still keep in touch with today. And I've reconnected with some. And in fact, I'm celebrating my 20th school year anniversary this year. So that's a thing. It's been 20 years since I graduated high school. So that's, celebrating this year. And I'm not the only one of my class that don't have children. A lot of my classmates don't. Because I think we were kind of like, because we graduated in 2002, I'd say about half of us don't have kids, the other half do. And I think we were kind of at that age, or that kind of that generation where children were not the most important thing for a lot of us. Like, and not that it wasn't, like, I always wanted to be a mom, and I still do. But we decided to maybe put our time and our career and stuff first, because we wanted to have like a stability for a family. And some people choose to have children, you know, as soon as they get out of high school, and that's, you know, that's their thing too. But yeah, I mean, I have a, you know, great tribe, great family, great spiritual family. And if that happens one day, amen. You know, and I know my mom had always said that, she always thought that I would end up with somebody who's a few years older that already had children, because she thought I would do really well with older kids. She didn't, because as a kid, you know, not having younger siblings, I don't even think I've ever changed a diaper.
I would like to say you're missing out, but I get that, I would be lying.
But it's just for that, like, I was in my neighborhood when I was growing up, I was of the younger generation of kids there. And as we grew up, there weren't really younger kids under us, because we were the youngest. And then we kind of grew, as we grew, there weren't any younger ones under us. So for us, you know, when the neighborhood grew up, there was no generation under us. So there wasn't a lot of like babysitting and stuff when I was a kid. So I think my mom was kind of hit the nail on the head. So I'm like, okay, you know, and it's not, I'm totally open to that. You know, if that's what God puts on my heart and I end up with somebody has some old kids, cool, you know. But it's important to have that tribe, that solid support system around you just for your entire life, and not being afraid to let people in, but also knowing where your boundaries lie too, and keeping yourself safe. Just, you know, because you're going to get hurt. There's going to be a lot of hurt along the way, but you can do it. And sure, there, you know, and just as a reminder, families fight, families argue and have disagreements and don't always have the same opinions as you do, but they're still your family, regardless of like how they became your family. And that's, if you guys can get through that, that means your bond is even stronger.
Yep. So one of the things I raised my girls doing is that no matter what, they're gonna have friends that come and go, but they're sisters. They're always going to be sisters. That's a title that doesn't go away.
Right.
No matter where they're at and what they're doing. And they will fight sometimes and argue because they don't see things eye to eye. And I mean, they could be not speaking to each other, and the two not speaking to each other, if one of them were to fall, if one of them were to end up in an emergency situation, you're darn tootin' that they would, I don't know where that came from, but anyway, they are going to drop whatever was the problem, and they will be the first ones there, and they will fight off anyone who gets in between them. I mean, they are very close knit, very close knit. Now that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't mean they always, like, if one does something really stupid, they're not going to stand there and go, well, no, that wasn't stupid. No, they're going to say, no, that was stupid. Don't do that again. You know what I'm saying? That's just the way they are. And the other piece too, I like what you're saying about, you don't know who's going to come into your life, EJ.
Right.
You know, there may be a man who has children that are older. And I can speak from experience that, like I said earlier, my stepkids are my kids, and my kids are my husband's kids. Like him and one of my daughters are out. They went on a journey together today. I'm like, okay, cool. She was like, that's a little weird. I'm like, it probably has something to do with Mother's Day.
Oh, that's right. That is coming up.
But you know, he did. He's like, hey, you want to go hang out with me? I could use the company. And so they're, you know, and my three are the ones who have all our grandchildren. We have 9 grandchildren, but those grandbabies are his.
Yeah. Amen.
He loves them. They are his grandkids.
Yeah.
Now, is he excited for his kids to start having kids so that, you know, he has, you know, yeah, but they're still his. So, and he has a huge role in my kids' life and the grandkids' life. He is grandpa, he is stepdad, he is a dad, and to them, and they take that seriously. It matters to them. So,
Family, it's not just blood, it's everything else.
I think on Supernatural, they say family doesn't end in blood or something along those
Or
lines.
families don't mean blood or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Well,
I
what's
lo-
great about the title of this is Family Ties. The word ties, sometimes it can be a knot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that knot can be like a Gordian knot, like, yeah, it's gonna take a sword.
Right. But then and exactly that. And I also think of the Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 scripture about a cord of 3 strands cannot be broken. So
Yeah.
and that, while that is used oftentimes as a scripture during a wedding, it can also mean family.
Yes, absolutely.
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 Yep. I love those scriptures. We shared some good stuff today, ladies. Thanks.
It was a fun one.
Yeah, I loved it. And I would just like to say a huge thank you to Lexi for coming on and sharing. I don't know if I had been in a similar situation that I would be suddenly ready to share all that right away, but I mean, kudos to her for being willing and able to put that out there. Thank you, Tina, for, being vulnerable and being willing to let her share that. Cause I can imagine, like you said, you were a little embarrassed with the past.
Indiscretion.
Yeah. So.
That means if I ever decide to write my story, it might have some interesting parts.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
you have a new chapter to add to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it was super important for her to be able to tell her story. And if I can't allow a little bit of mine to be told, she can't tell hers. And it's a pretty good story. She's a good storyteller.
Yeah. Yes,
She speaks well.
she does.
Well, just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This episode will be available on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. And if you don't use social media, you can email us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. Feel free to review us on Anchor, leave feedback on the platform you listen to us on, or message us through our social media or email, because we'd love to hear what you think. And if there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, message us and we'll see about making it happen. You can find me, EJ, on Twitter and Instagram as EJ8302. And again, huge thank you to Lexi for joining us today. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.